Hello. In this video, I'm going to show you how a rose ground is made and what you're looking for on a prick-in to find a rose ground. So here is my Elasa Rosarium pattern, and it's got 3 different rose grounds on it. So this is the one that you're probably more familiar with. This is what I call the traditional rose ground. Then this one here is an 8 thread or more. And then this one here is what I've called a 2-pin rose ground because it only uses 2 pins as opposed to the 4 pins. And all 3 of these have been made on exactly the same prick-in. So this is what it will look like when you get a prick-in. It is generally a series of 4 pins. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 in a diamond shape and with a box. Now it could be just a small coloured box here which would show a rose ground, but I generally make mine look like this. So this is what I call a rose ground pattern. And how does it work? Well, I consider the rose ground to be made of 3 parts because there's a first part which you have to do, but you don't actually pin up. Then there's the second part, which I think of as the pins. And then there's the third part, which is generally another stitch, which you don't pin up. Now, without doing the first and third part, which is here A, B, C and D, without those 2 parts, you're basically just doing a ground stitch. So you really need to have the A and the B and the C and the D in order to create the shape of the rose ground. And the traditional version is a square with a circle in the middle. So on the traditional version, you have 4 pairs, 2 on the left and 2 on the right. And the first thing that you're going to do in part 1 is to cross stitch and twist the 2 left-hand pairs and then the 2 right-hand pairs. And these are marked as A and B on this diagram. And what they do is they create your corners of a square. So that's the first part. And without that part, it wouldn't create the square. Otherwise you're just going straight into your pins as you do generally with a ground stitch. And I always think of these A and B's as pinching the threads together because it joins the threads here and here to create the corners of your squares. So that's your part 1, and personally I think that's really important because without it you don't get the shape of your rose ground. So once you've got your part 1 done, and on a traditional one it's generally a cross stitch and twist, but on the 2-pin version it's a half stitch. So just bear that in mind, that there are at least 16 different variations on a rose ground. So part 2 is then pins. So on this version you have a series of 4 pins, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the first part you're going to do is you work a half stitch with the 2 middle pairs into pin 1. Then you're going to half stitch the 2 side pairs. Now the 2 pairs on the left are independent of the 2 pairs on the right, so it doesn't matter whether you go 1, 2, 3 or 1, 2, 3, because these 2 aren't relying on the pairs over here. They're independent of each other. I tend to go to the left, but you'll find your own method of working this. So once you've done that first pin, you're then going to half stitch the 2 left, half stitch the 2 right, or whatever stitch you're doing for your rose ground. I'm just talking you through the traditional one. And so once you've got these 2 side pins in, you're then going to half stitch the 2 middle pairs again and pin up in the bottom pin. And all of these pins have been closed, so you're doing half stitch, pin, half stitch. So that's all the pins done. But in order to make the final part, you need to do this pinching effect again, which then creates the bottom of your rose ground, the bottom of your square. And to do that, you're going to do the same stitch that you did as A and B. So in a traditional one, you do a cross stitch and twist. So you'll cross stitch and twist the two left and cross stitch and twist the two right. Now, I would strongly recommend doing that when you finish your rose ground. Don't leave it and think, oh yes, I'll come back and do that, because if you go off and do something different, then you're likely to forget that you need to do that. So I always tend to do part 1, which is A and B, part 2, which is your 4 pins, and then part 3, which is C and D. Straight away, I don't go into leaving it. And as you can see here, here's our traditional version. So here's the pinching effect, A and B. These are your 4 pins, and then this is your second pinching effect, C and D. And you can clearly see it makes a square with the circle in the middle. So I'm going to show you now how that is done on your lace pillow. I am just about to start my first rose ground, and I've located my 2 pairs on the left and my 2 pairs on the right. So as explained, I am going to put a cross stitch and twist on my left hand pairs, but not pin up. So there's my cross stitch, there's my twist, and then I'm going to do the same on the right. So there's my cross stitch and then a twist. So that is the first part of my rose ground done, and nothing has been pinned up yet. So now I need to start looking at the 4 pins. So this is my top pin, this is my left pin, right pin and bottom pin. So I'm going to do those in half stitch, pin, half stitch. So I'm going to do my half stitch and pin up and then close with a half stitch. So as you can see, my gold pair has moved through my right. So then I'm going to do my left hand. Now it doesn't matter if you do your left or your right first, because both of them are independent of each other. So you can, it's entirely up to you, but you'll find it easier to go one way than the other. And that won't become clear until you've done a few of them. So I'm going to do my half stitch and pin up. Close that with a half stitch, and then I'm going to do the same on my right hand side. Half stitch, pin up, half stitch, and then I've got my 2 middle pairs to do my bottom pin. So that's half stitch, pin up and close with a half stitch. So as you can see, my 2 white pairs have travelled from one side to the other, and my 2 gold pairs have travelled from one side to the other. So that's what happens when you do a half stitch, your pairs travel. So that's the second part. So the first part was doing my cross stitch and twist, but no pins. The second part is my half stitch, pin, half stitch, and then my final part is to do my cross stitch and twist and on my left hand pair and my cross stitch and twist on my right. So that's my first rose ground done. Now it's entirely up to you as to whether you go to the left or to the right, because again they're independent and both sides can be worked without the other side being worked, if that makes sense. So I'm going to go to the left, so I'm going to bring in my next 2. So there's my next 2, and there's my 2 that are from my previous rose ground. So the first thing I've got to do is make sure I have my cross stitch and twist on my pairs. My left 2 don't have a cross stitch and twist, so I'm just going to put that on. But my right hand pairs do from the previous rose ground, so I don't need to worry about that again, because it finishes one rose ground, but it is also the start of the next rose ground. You don't want to put 2 cross stitch and twists on. So that was easy. So now all I have to do is just go straight into my half stitch, pin, half stitch, then I can do the, now I'm going to do my right hand ones first, just to show you that you can. Now this is going to feel really funny for me because I always tend to go to the left, and I have no idea, but you'll find that you prefer to go to one side rather than the other side first. So I'm doing my half stitch, pinning up. I think it's all to do with the left and right side of the brain. So that's my right hand pair done before my left. So now I'm going to do my left half stitch, pin up, close with a half stitch. So that then leaves me with my bottom two, my bottom pin and my middle two pairs again. So I'm just going to shorten this thread. So half stitch, pin up and close with a half stitch. So as you can see, again, my gold have moved through my two whites and my two whites have moved through my golds, so you can see them traveling. So at the moment they don't have their cross stitch and twists on, so I'm going to pop that on now, and that's those two. So I'm going to do this last pair, these two here for this last one. Now I've got enough pins in to now support my gimp thread, so I'm going to take out my berry pin, because that now you can see the gimp thread sitting there quite happily. So I'm going to do my cross stitch and twist on my left hand pair, but my right hand pair's already got it on, so I don't need to worry about it. So now I can go straight into my half stitch. So that's the two middle pairs for the top pin. Then I'm going to do my left hand, half stitch, pin, half stitch. Then my right hand pairs, half stitch, pin when I can grab it, half stitch. And then my two middle pairs for my bottom pin, half stitch, pin up and close with a half stitch. So now I need to do my cross stitch and twist on my two left hand pairs and my cross stitch and twist on my two right hand pairs. Now while I'm down here, I'm just going to ignore this gimp for a moment because I want to talk to you about when you move on from your rose ground onto these next pins here, onto any next part that isn't a rose ground, because what happens is that these two threads here are what I call pinched together. So if I just undo that, normally this pair would travel in a diagonal line down to that pin, and this pair would travel in a diagonal line down to that pin. But if you put a cross stitch and twist on there, can you see it distorts it? It pinches the threads together, so it's not always obvious where these pairs are going. So one thing that I suggest doing is whenever you have to work these two pairs into the next part of your work, make sure you work both of them straight away, and I'll show you what I mean. So if I do a half stitch pin up with this first one, and I know I haven't done the gimp, but I wanted to show you this before I put the gimp in, because this is going to be really crucial, because this is the point where I find a lot of mistakes are made. Because when you come to do the next one, if you do it straight after this one, so you work the two pins straight after the other, so one after the other, you can then immediately see that those two have been worked correctly. They've been finished in the right way. If you work one pair and leave this other pair hanging around and don't work it, go off and do something else, answer the phone, make a cup of tea, when you come back, there is every possibility that you will have forgotten that this pair needs to go into there, and you will think that it's already been made because it looks like there's a stitch already on those threads, which there is, but it's not actually a stitch that is made into your pinhole. So this is where a lot of mistakes occur, because you don't people don't work the two straight after the other. So I've just worked one, and so I would then work this second one straight away before going anywhere else, before making a cup of tea, because it means then you can now see both of those threads are going in the correct direction. I always suggest doing that. Always make sure when you're finishing off or taking your rose ground threads somewhere else, do them two at a time. So do that pair, then that pair straight after the other. Don't do this pair and then go and make a cup of tea. Make sure you do both pairs, then make a cup of tea. Because when you've got a lot of pins and a lot of pairs of bobbins, it's really hard to actually see what's happening with your lace. This one's really easy because it's open and there's not many pairs and there's not many pins. So let's go back to the top. So I'm going to come down this way because I want to show you this middle one, which is really nice to do, and I'll show you why. So here's my left two. They've got their cross stitch and twist on them. Just double check because when you move your bobbins around, there is such a thing as a bobbin muddler, and it will arrive at your pillow at the worst time possible. So that's got its cross stitch and twist on it. So I just need my next two pairs, and they need to be cross stitch and twist. So cross stitch and twist, and that's my next two pairs for my next rose ground. So I've got my cross stitch and twist, my first part of my rose ground done, straight into my pins. Half stitch, pin up, close, half stitch, pin up and close with a half stitch, and then a half stitch, pin up, close, half stitch, pin up and close. So that's my pins part of my rose ground done. So I now need to do my final part, which is my cross stitch and twist, and my cross stitch and twist. So now I'm ready to do this middle one, and this middle one is really easy because look, I have my cross stitch and twists already on my pairs, so I don't need to worry about that part. So when you get a lot of rose ground all in an area, it's so quick and easy to do. So we've done our cross stitch and twist, that's already on there, straight into our pins. Half stitch, pin up and half stitch. So then your sides, and you'll see I always tend to go to the left when I do my rose grounds. But I'm not saying that's right or wrong, I'm just saying that's how I work and I feel comfortable working. And believe me, if you try and go the opposite way first, it feels really uncomfortable. It's really strange. So that's my pins done, and as you can see, these threads, these golds, which is why I've done it in two colours, is that you can see where the colours are travelling to and from because we're doing half stitch. So then I'm going to do a cross stitch and twist and a cross stitch and twist. So that's that one done. Now just bear in mind that with these pinholes you could actually change the stitch to make it a cross stitch and twist. It's just going to make a bigger stitch, and it's going to change the shape of your stitch because there's more thread involved. So but I'm going to carry on with half stitch for the minute so that all my gold threads end up on the other side. So I will do those, and then I'm going to come back and talk you through taking the gimp down the bottom. I've now completed all of my rose ground, and you can definitely see what happens with your threads when you do a rose ground, because these golds were on the right and they're now on the left. And you can see that they've created lovely squares with a little circle in the middle of them. Now, if you forget to put on the cross stitch and twist, all you'll be doing is just half stitch, pin, half stitch in, which is your ground. So you won't get that pattern. So that cross stitch and twist is really crucial. So the next stage I need to do before I can work these pins here, these ground pins here, I have my gimp thread between my rose ground and my ground thread pins. So that means that my gimp thread has to travel down here. Now what I'm going to do with this one, because we're dealing with rose ground, I'm going to take my gimp thread through 2 and then I'm going to work my 2 pairs. So my gimp thread is on the left and it needs to travel to the right. So it's going to go over the first bobbin and under the second one, and then I'm going to twist. So over and under, and if you put this bobbin here, you've done the twist as well. So now I'm going to use this white pair to come down through these 2 pairs that have just done my gimp, gone through my gimp, and I'm doing them 2 at a time because we're dealing with a rose ground. Normally I would take my gimp all the way through, but if you've not done a gimp before, or if you've not done rose ground, do them 2 at a time, and it's easier to keep track of where your pairs are coming from and going to. So I'm just going to do half stitch, pin up and close with a half stitch. So that's my first pair done, and I'm going to do half stitch, pin up and close with a half stitch. So that's my first 2 done, and I can now bring through my next 2. So it's my gimp thread's still on the left and it needs to come to the right, so it's going over and under, and I'm twisting straight away. So over and under and twisting, and then I'm going to do my 2 pins with my 2 pairs. So it's half stitch, pin, half stitch. It just means then once you know where you're going and what you're doing, it means that you can take your gimp straight down. But if you're just learning, take it slow, because it's so confusing where your threads are going to and coming from, and anything that makes it easier, especially when you've got this pinching effect from the cross stitch and twist. So my last 2 pairs, because those 2 need to go through there to those 2 pins. So when you do that, you can really see that little X, that little cross there. So we're going over and under and then straight over there, and we've done the twist, over and under, and there's the twist. And then we can do our half stitch, pin up, close with a half stitch. Now this one here I'm going to do slightly differently, because I want this white to go back down this line here. So if I was to just do a half stitch, pin, half stitch, my white would go off into my rose ground, and I don't want that. I want to control where my white thread is going, so it creates a little white border, the same as the gold will make a gold border on the other side. So in order to achieve that, I'm going to do a cross stitch and twist, pin up and close that with a cross stitch and twist. And now you see that my gold is going into my rose ground and my white is going down here. So that's one of the ways that we can manipulate our threads and put them where we want them to be. So now I'm going to come down the other side. So this time I'm going to take my gimp all the way through. So this gimp is on the right and it needs to be on the left. So it's going under the first bobbin and over the second. So under, over, twist, under, over, twist. So that's my first 2. So if you're just learning and you're not sure about where your pairs are going, take your, I think it's your white thread. Are we on the white thread or are we on the gold? I'll have a look at that in a minute. You take your thread and you can travel it down. But I'm going to carry on down my line. So it's under, over, twist, under, over, twist, under, over, twist, under, over, twist. So I've reached the bottom of my diamond. So what I now need to do is I need to put a twist on my bobbins, on my gimp threads, so that this bobbin that was on the right goes off down to the left, and this bobbin that was on the left goes down this line to the right. And that's my gimp thread finished with on that side. So I'm going to change things around a little bit, because I'm going to do this side as a cross stitch and twist. Now I wouldn't, if you want to do that on your design, that's fine, but I want to show you the difference a half stitch pin half stitch makes compared to a cross stitch and twist pin cross stitch and twist. So if I do them side by side, you'll be able to see. So mine is more of a sampler, because I want you to see what the difference is, and that means then that whenever you see a ground stitch, a single pin on its own, you can decide which ground stitch you want to do depending on what look you want. So I'm going to go and do that. Let me show you the first couple. So this is my white pair coming down here. So I'm going to do cross stitch and twist, pin up, and then cross stitch and twist for the next one. So I've done cross stitch and twist, pin up, and close with a cross stitch and twist. And this is going to look completely different to the other side. So one's going to come out square and one's going to come out as oblong. And while I'm here, I'm also going to do a cross stitch and twist edge, pin up, and close that with a cross stitch and twist. So you can see that with a cross stitch and twist, the pairs stay where they are, because this gold hasn't moved at all, and it's going to create a completely different look. So I'm going to go and do that, and then I'm going to get all my bobbins ready for the 8 thread amore. I think it's pronounced like that, but it's a form of rose ground. It's going to be very different, but it's going to be using your 4 pins and your 4 pairs exactly as we have just done. And what it's going to do is it's going to completely muddle up all my golds and my whites. So that's going to be quite interesting. So I'm hoping you'll be able to see what's going on. So I hope this video has been informative. Rose ground is such a beautiful stitch, but I do know it causes a lot of issues because of those pins, those stitches that aren't pinned, and then you're pinning and then you aren't pinning. So it's it's just a little bit more intense, because you've got a little bit more work to do at the stitches, but the effect is amazing, and I hope you'll agree. I think it's actually one of my favourite. Thanks for watching.